Holly Dunaway, former boxing champion. I have a cousin named M.R. Price, Michael, and he wrote a book called The Loop. Here it is, right here. It's available on Amazon. I'm going to read a little bit of it to you today. I did read ahead just a little bit, and it's super exciting. If you're into war, then or sniper sort of scenarios, it's a high paced, like action packed book. And he does the artwork himself on here. He's also an artist. And this is the author right there. This is M.R. Price, Michael, my cousin. My dad and his mother are brother and sister. The sun was just starting to brighten the day as I parked the car just outside their border. This was where the police wouldn't dare cross. I was not the police. I took as many back alleys as I could until I got to one of the buildings across the street from their headquarters. I went to the last alley to see more of a gang guarding this building as well. It was the perfect sniper position and the perfect place to set up a revenge attack. I should have expected gang members to be here, I thought. Mere hours ago, I was here, scouting escaping routes to make a clean getaway from the club. Now, I was about to tear that entire building down around this gang. I silently took out one gang member guarding the entrance to the door, and I threw him in the dumpster. Then I sneaked into the door, mindful of everywhere I put my feet. Thankfully, I was still wearing all black. I blended in with the darkness of the abandoned building. I heard laughter coming from my door on the right. A card game was going on from the sound of it. I tied a string to the door and pulled the pin on one of my grenades. Within 5 seconds of opening the door, dead bodies were going to litter the stairwell, and they would know I was here. I silently made my way up to the third floor. There was no sign of anyone else in the building. Poor security, I thought. One man to guard the door, and 5 more on the lower floor playing cards. I slowly opened the door, spotting the sniper out looking out the window. Amateur, I thought. Anyone that wanted to snipe directly from the window was just asking to get sniped himself. I pulled a knife and threw it, sticking it into the back of his neck. Too stunned to scream out, I ran forward and made sure he would never scream again. I dragged him down the side and set up the bipod on my sniper rifle on the table. Far away from the window, I left it there and set up another string and grenade down the hallway to guard my back as I sniped off as many gang members as I could. So violent. I closed the door and looked through my scope. I immediately spotted Bethany along with several other of Gerald's girls on the third floor, directly across from me. The window of my building was old and rotted. It was no longer a window, just a big hole in the wall. So I could see clearly down the front door. One gang member was antagonizing the girls, while one kept watch at the door. I decided to take the doorman out first. My silenced .308 made a loud pop as it fired, while it silenced more by the walls of my hideout. The doorman went down, leaving a bright red spot on the wall behind him. The man who had been antagonizing the girls looked first at the broken window that my bullet had just gone through. Then he looked at my buddy who was on the floor. He grabbed his radio, but let it drop as the bullet took out the side of his head. He slumped to the floor, leaving the girls looking around frantically, wondering what had just happened. They were oblivious to my shots. Bethany stood out amongst the girls. She sat cool and calm. Not a single tear rolled down her face. Why would she be scared, I thought. She already died 3 times. None of the other gang members seemed to notice my shot, so I aimed again at the two standing in front of the entrance. My bullet passed through the first man's head and shattered the window sliding beside the door. I switched targets and quickly took out the other front doorman. I glanced up at the girls, making sure no one else came through to check on them. Then I looked back at the door. Someone was already on the radio looking out the window, so I fired. Seconds later, I heard an explosion from downstairs. I calmly let go of my rifle and got behind the table, counting and calculating. At a run, I calculated 6 stairs per second, 15 stairs per floor, and 30 feet down the hallway. Unless they'd been hit with the shrapnel, they would make it to me in about 8 or 10 seconds. At 7 seconds, I heard the second explosion, and someone gasped in pain. I heard his body hit the floor. I counted 5 more seconds and heard no more footsteps. The only sound was one man groaning in pain. I looked back at the girls, and someone was coming to their door. I lowered the crosshairs and fired. His head rocked back, and the red mist sprayed an already painted red wall. On the ground, I saw more men running down the drive, and as I led them by a little, but fired, and then fired again and again. Each time, someone fell to the ground. Only a few made it past my line of sight. I glanced at the girls one more time. They were alone. Bethany had undone her hands and was helping the other girls untie their hands as well. I left my rifle there and pulled my 9mm. I waited until I heard footsteps hit the last flight of steps before I swung the door open and my last grenade down the hall. "Go back," was the last thing that man ever said. Boom! I pulled my pistol and walked down the hallway. The man who had tried to come in on me made it just outside the door before he died. A streak of blood showed that he had tried to come in even though he had been hit. Admirable, I thought. 3 men further down the hall weren't moving while the fourth was clutching his belly and crawling back towards the stairs. Without a thought, I'd walked by him and pulled the trigger, more merciful than I should have been. But I had been shot by a dying man before. I never was one to learn a lesson twice. I made my way to the front entrance and looked out. More men were crossing the street. I picked a dark corner and waited until all of them were past the threshold before firing. 7 men, 7 shots, and they were down. I hit the street running and didn't stop until I was at the wall. It was then that I holstered my pistol and took out the M4. This was what I was good at. Close quarters combat was one of my favorite type of combat. It was fast and unpredictable. The mind didn't have time to think. The body just had time to react. It was one of the last things on earth that made me feel alive. I sidestepped across the gateway and heard bullets whiz by my head. I fired, aiming at the center of my target rather than the head. It was bigger and easier target while on the move. I used the hedges decorating the yard as concealment, but it didn't do much to protect me from the bullets. At least they couldn't see what they were shooting. The gunmen at the door began to get frantic. I could hear the panic in their voices as I continued to fire. It was mainly suppressive fire at this point, just firing to make them keep their heads down. I rounded the last hedge and I saw 3 men hide behind the huge concrete columns at the front of the stoop of the house. I cleared and 3 steps and 1 jump. They had been so busy trying to keep from getting shot that they didn't notice me until I was within spitting distance. 3 shots and they were down. I dropped my magazine and rammed one home before kicking in the front door. I came in and did as I was trained, sweeping my M4 to each corner of the room. No men were in the foyer. I moved left and started clearing the first floor. When I came into the first room on the left, the bullet hit the wall beside my head, sprayed me with sheetrock and wood. I quickly rolled behind the couch and stood firing. My shots were more accurate than his by far, but I didn't go unscathed as he grazed my right shoulder. Ignoring the little scratch, I jumped over the couch as a grenade came skipping into the room. I kicked it back into the room from which it came. I was thankful that I wasn't fighting military trained soldiers. He had just pulled the pin and threw it rather than counting the seconds before. I hit the floor, and as it went off, shrapnel came through the doorway, shattering lamps and windows. Some came through the wall, spraying me with even more sheetrock and wood. I squinted my eyes to keep as much of the dust out of my eyes as possible and went into the doorway. 4 men lay on the ground, either dead or dying. I put a bullet into each one just in case. Before making my way deeper into the house, I finally made it to the stairwell and began my ascent slowly. I rounded the first landing, making a U-turn up the second flight, and I saw a grenade bouncing down the stairs. All my cycles of military training served me to that day. I had done this so many times. The urge to run back down the stairs were no longer there. Knowing if I went back down, the grenade would just follow me. I bounded up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. I leaped into the landing on my side while pulling the trigger on the culprit as I threw it. He went down, and as the grenade exploded, peppering the ceiling and part of the wall beside me in shrapnel. As I rolled to my feet, another gang member came rushing at me with a knife. I ducked his swinging and holstered him into the air with my shoulder, sending him careening down the stairs. Just for good measure, I fired 2 shots into his skull as he settled into the first turn. I started down the hallway, and as another shot was fired, I felt a familiar sting in my left leg. More bullets came firing at random through the wall on my left. I myself into the doorway, firing much more accurately than at the assailant. And he went down. I dropped my magazine and rammed a new one home before looking down at my leg. He had missed the bone. That much was obvious. However, it was much more than a graze. I felt blood running down both sides of my leg, and there were 2 holes in my jeans. At least the bullet went in and out. I'll have to stitch that up later, I thought. I worked my way through the house and up the final stairway to the 3rd floor without further incident. As I slowly made my way to the top of the stairs, I called out, "Beth? Now look, ain't no need for this. Tell me what it is that you want," the voice came in within the girl's room. I crept as close to the door as I dared. Bullets would tear through the walls of that room. Little late for negotiations, don't you think, Valentin? I asked. I know you? Let's just say I know you. Listen, man, you've done shot up my whole gang. I ain't got nothing else to give you. Just tell me what it is you want. Let the girls go. Ha! And let you have a clear shot at me? Nah, no deal. Okay, let the girls go or you'll join the rest of your gang. Listen, man, I ain't stupid. I know this is retaliation for shooting up Gerald's place. You ain't gonna let me walk out of here alive, and I know that. I'm gonna make you work for this. I did a quick walk by the door, and then I had to dive roll across the floor. Valentin had crouched down behind the girls, 3 more of his gang members. The girls were too scared to move. Bethany was held in place by Valentin. Remembering the gang members where the gang members were, I walked by again, a little faster this time, and fired into the room twice. I didn't have to look. 2 gang members crumpled to the floor with bullet holes between their eyes, leaving only Valentin and 1 other. Bullets tore through the wall right behind me as I continued. Last chance, Valentin! Ah! I'm gonna start shooting these girls you came here to save, hero. I'll take them with me, you hear? I poked my head back inside and took out the last gang member before aiming at Valentin. It was a difficult shot, but I took it. My bullet passed directly between the 2 standing girls and grazed Bethany's ear, catching Valentin right in his right eye. His head rocked back and fell to the floor. I did a quick glance around the room for any others before relaxing. Whew. Oh my gosh. Woo! This is exciting. I was on the edge of my seat this whole time. Let's go. Without looking back, I started to descend the stairs, hearing the girls run and get behind me. You shot me! Again! Bethany said as she started down the 2nd flight of stairs. I glanced back, looking at the small chunk missing from her ear. Well, at least I didn't send you back to high school. I heard her say. I chuckled slightly and continued to keep my eyes peeled for anyone else. As we made it back through the house, the girls were whimpering. Some even gagged at the sight of the bodies on the 1st floor. All my senses were still on high alert, sweeping the weapon left and right, making absolute sure the coast was clear. Either they were all dead or they were hiding. As I thought, a gang is a gang, cowards in every one. We've got to go out the front yard, and I turned to check all the windows for possible snipers. As we made it halfway across the front gate, I heard the sound of a helicopter. I turned in time to see a rocket smashing into the front entrance. The house exploded. I was sent flying into the front wall and a hedge bush. My ears rang and my vision was blurry. I could hear the muffled screams and shouts of the girls. Soon came the men's voices. I struggled to hold on to consciousness, struggled to stand, and struggled to fire at the men, but my limbs weren't working. Within a few seconds, the sound of the helicopter and the men were gone. I dragged myself out of the hedge, trying to shake the cobwebs. Then all went dark. When I woke, I could hear the women crying, as well as a few men cussing. I slowly opened my eyes and was on the table in the middle of what looked like armory. Guns were stacked all along the walls. I started to sit up and somebody put a hand on my shoulder. Slow down there, hero, he laughed. Gerald, by the sound of his voice. Man, we were coming up to help you, but it seems like we got there too late. My mom told me one man was shooting up the Valentine gang, but my travel time here and the time it took me to gather up the rest of my men, you understand? I nodded. My head was pounding. Possible concussion, I thought. Gerald helped me sit up and swung my legs to hang off the table. Noticing my pants were torn and bandage was around my leg. Who took out the building? I said. See, I told you he didn't do that. I heard some of Gerald's men behind me arguing. We're not sure. We thought it might have been you settling in after you freed the girls. I shook my head. I didn't carry that sort of power. I shook my head. I didn't carry that sort of firepower with me. A helicopter fired a rocket straight into the front entrance after we got out. I was still trying to clear my mind. I always hated getting knocked out. It took me hours sometimes to think clearly. The ringing in my ears had faded, but it was still there. Where's Bethany? Oh, what an exciting book. Oh my gosh. All right, so this book is available on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. Again, it is called The Loop, and it is by M.R. Price. Gosh, that's exciting. My cousin is a vet, so yeah, I guess you could probably tell by the story. It's really exciting. I'm gonna read the rest of it, and who knows, I may kind of do another video just kind of summing everything up for you guys, but go to Amazon and check out the full book. I'll see you guys tomorrow on hollydunaway.com or on YouTube. Bye guys.